And ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, this is TV Courtroom. If you know anything about TV Courtroom, you know that what we try to do here is to enlighten folks about what really goes on in the legal system. Well, I guess before I do any of that, let me do this. This is TV Courtroom, hosted by yours truly, attorney Michael X. And I encourage folks to please, and I do mean please, contact family, contact friends, contact associates, contact everybody who might be interested in learning about important issues affecting the African American community. And to be quite candid, it's not just the African American community, it's the entire community here in Philadelphia. In particular, the 350,000 local TV households that have access to Philly Cam. And by Philly Cam, I mean right here, right now, TV Courtroom. And for those who don't know, this TV Courtroom show is quite similar to what I do on the radio at WURD 96.1 FM, WURD 900 AM, and WURDradio.com. On the radio, we do this radio courtroom thing where we talk to you about the law. And right here, you guessed it, we do this TV courtroom thing. And today, there are three topics that pertain indirectly to law, but directly to politics. And if you know anything about the legal system, you know it comes out of politics. So that's why I said at the outset, I wanted to encourage folks to contact family, friends, associates, and others so that they can tune into today's show. Because as Brother Malcolm said, and if you look over my right shoulder, right there, you see Brother Malcolm X. And Brother Malcolm always talked about what he called the ballot or the bullet. The ballot or the bullet. In other words, Brother Malcolm said that change has to come. Change will come by the ballot or the bullet. And clearly, we're not talking about getting guns and shooting anybody. So the only option is the ballot. And from the ballot comes elections. And from elections comes elected officials. And from elected officials come the creation of law, at least in one branch of the government. You have the executive branch, you have the judicial branch, and you have the legislative branch. I'm focusing primarily on the legislative branch because I'm going to talk to you about the law, how the law comes out of politics. And there's three things in particular, well, I should say three topics in particular that I want to share with you relative to the law and how the law works. And as you know, an election is coming up, and I'm not necessarily going to tell you who you should vote for, but I'm going to tell you who I'm voting for. More precisely, I'm going to tell you who I'm not voting for. And you have the option to accept or reject any of that. So the three topics I'll be dealing with today is one, Black Trump supporters who think he gave them stimulus checks are stupid. Let me repeat that. Number one, Black Trump supporters who think he gave them stimulus checks, as they call it, Stimmy checks, are stupid. That's number one. And I put that at the top of the list because, as you can see, I'm Black. And you might not know this, but I'm born and raised in North Philly. So I'm from the hood. I teach at Temple University, which is located right in the hood. And I can't tell you how many times in the past several months, the past few years since the COVID epidemic, by the way, COVID is still here. I want you all to know it hasn't gone anywhere. It's not as severe as it was in 2020, 2021, but it is serious. I'll deal with that in another TV courtroom episode. But since 2021, 2022, Black people from the hood, where I was born and raised, foolishly, ignorantly, stupidly believe that Trump gave them Stimmy money. They really believe that. And they're saying that because he did that, they're going to vote for him in the 2024 presidential election. That's topic number one. I want to talk about that because it's near and dear to me. The second topic is somebody who, speaking of near and dear, somebody who, you know, that saying where they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. They were talking about my beloved brother, Cornel West, because it's Cornel West who's making a very, very bad move. And by the way, as you probably see, I'm trying to adjust my camera here because anybody who knows anything about me, you know about my feeling about historic Cheney University. So I have directly behind me a lot of my Cheney paraphernalia. Over directly above me is an emblem of Cheney when it was known as Cheney State College. It became Cheney University in 1983. I graduated in 1982. And one of the last things I got there was that emblem directly above me, Cheney State College. And then on the opposite side of that, for those who know anything about history, is one of the greatest, I was going to say black men, but one of the greatest men in Philadelphia history, Octavius Catto. And he has a strong connection to Cheney. When he was there, it wasn't called Cheney. That's like the 1800s. It was then the African Institute and the Institute for Colored Youth. There's some other stuff behind me that I don't need to get into, but on this side, to my left, directly under an image of a beautiful black boy, is one of the first items I ever got from Cheney. I got into Cheney 1978, graduated in 1982. So in 1978, that first item I got from Cheney was a Cheney reversible t-shirt, blue with white lettering on one side and white with blue lettering on the other side. And what I decided to do is to, after years and years, do the math, about 40 years, it got frayed and it's gotten worn and it's gotten holes in it. But I did something I saw at a museum where somebody took a university jacket, a lettered jacket, and put it in the frame. So that's what I have behind me on this side, left side, correction, left side. And I'm talking about that because everything that I am comes out of Cheney. So I got all that stuff about Cheney behind me, but let me get back to my point. The point is, speaking of stuff near and dear to me, is Dr. Cornel West and certainly Cheney University. But I mentioned in regard to Dr. Cornel West that there's a saying that applies to him perfectly. And that saying goes like this: the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I'm not going to talk about Dr. West right now, but he's running for president and he's progressive, he's woke, he's enlightened, he's scholarly, he's a great man. But if he succeeds, and what I mean by succeeding is not winning, because it's not virtually, it's actually impossible for him to win. But what he could do is to help Trump win. And that's the exact opposite of what he wants to do, because I would go so far as to say that Cornel West, and given the respect he deserves, the great Dr. Cornel West is probably the most enlightened / revolutionary candidate to ever run for president. And that's exactly why he should not run now, because he can't win. A progressive, a revolutionary can't win right now because of the state of American politics. But what progressives can do, what revolutionaries can do, is they can make sure that Orange Hitler doesn't win. They can make sure that Donald Trump doesn't win. In other words, progressives and revolutionaries can't get in the person that they want as president. Let me be more precise. We progressives, we revolutionaries can't get into office the person we want because there's not enough of us. The numbers prove that. So we can't get the guy in that we want, but we can keep the guy out that we don't want. I'm going to talk about what my beloved brother, Dr. Cornel West, is doing in terms of replicating history. And you know what they say, if you don't learn from history, repeat it. What happened 24 years ago in year 2000? George Bush became president because Ralph Nader, a great progressive, decided to run. And by running, he took away votes from Al Gore and indirectly gave votes to George Bush. And you see what happened. Well, Dr. Cornel West is doing the very same thing. I'm going to go into more detail about that later, but that's my second topic today. My third topic is Project 2025, going back to what my beloved mentor and the beloved mentor of any woke Black person, the great Malcolm X, he used to always say, make it plain. And by making it plain, what he means is this: if there's something that's complicated, that's convoluted, that's esoteric, and you're a professional in that field, and you talk to people who might not be professionals in that field, you got to make it plain. You got to make it clear to them what you mean without using that complicated jargon, that complex jargon, that esoteric jargon. Just as Brother Malcolm said, make it plain. So I'm going to make it plain in regard to Project 2025. Many of you know it's a document that's about 1,000 pages long. It's actually 922 pages, rounding off, that's 1,000 pages. And basically what it is a plan to turn America in 2024 what Hitler turned Germany into in 1933. Donald Trump's Project 2025 is Hitler's enabling act of 1933. So folks, get your pens and pads out, or your phones, and take notes. Take your iPads out, whatever you got. Take notes, because these three topics are critically important, because the future of America depends on it. I know that might sound like hyperbole, but trust me when I say the future of America depends upon it. So I know you got your notepads out. I know you got your iPads out. I know you got some type of recording devices out. So class is about to begin. It's now 3:41. Class will go on for another approximately 45, 46 minutes. And it's every word that I'm going to say during those approximately 45, 46 minutes are critically important. And I can't stress to you the importance of what I'm about to share with you, because literally, and I know people use the word literally excessively, but it really applies here. Literally, the future of America depends upon you understanding the three things I'm going to share with you. The first thing is, and by the way, two of the three topics I'm going to share with you are in the Philadelphia Tribune. I write a weekly column for the Tribune. I also write a second column, a monthly column. But in regard to the weekly column, and by the way, we got some great producers here. We got Roland, who's not here today. We got Riley, who's just as enlightened. When I begin to talk about stuff and rattle off some sources, I don't have to say it more than a couple of times, because producers and engineers like Riley put it right up there on the screen. So just go to phillytrib.com. That's phillytrib.com. And you can read all these articles that I'm mentioning to you for free. So two of the three topics I'm sharing with you are articles I wrote in the Philadelphia Tribune. And the first one that I want to share with you is entitled, in fact, let me just read verbatim the title of this article. Again, go to phillytrib.com, type in CORD, C-O-A-R-D, and for this first topic, type in CORD, C-O-A-R-D, and write in stimulus, S-T-I-M-U-L-U-S, stimulus. The headline of the article reads as follows, quote, Black Trump supporters need to know that he didn't give them stimulus money and that he's a racist. That's so powerful, I gotta repeat that. Black Trump supporters, I hope that my seat is not making too much noise for those in the listening audience. It's a chair that for some reason is making a lot of noise as I move from left to right. So maybe I just ought to sit still. That's what I'll do. The headline is Black Trump supporters need to know that he didn't give them stimulus money and that he's a racist. As I said at the outset of the show, coming from the hood, North Philly, 20th New York, teaching at Temple, right there on Broad Street, I'm constantly, even though I don't live there anymore, constantly going back. And I remember my days there. Each time I'm back and forth through the hood, North Philly, and I'm sure it applies, I know it applies to hoods throughout Philly, West Philly, South Philly, outside of Pennsylvania, all across the country, where unknowing Black people are low information voters. And I mean no respect by that, no disrespect by that, but when I say low information voters, I mean that they don't seek out quality information, and therefore they get all their stuff from social media. The good thing about social media is that it has a lot of information. The bad news about social media is that it has a lot of information. And most of the information is misinformation. And that misinformation can cause serious trouble. When I say cause serious trouble, I mean it leads them into thinking one thing and moving in the wrong direction based on the misinformation. So I'm here to disabuse folks of that misinformation. Here's what I say in the article. I'm going to probably spend about maybe 10 to 12 minutes on each of the three. So here's the first one. And remember, go to phillytrib.com, type in CORD, C-O-A-R-D, and type in stimulus, and then this article will come up. I want to read just a part of it and then explain what I meant by what I wrote. I start off by saying that, quote, at the outset, in fact, let me just start before then. I say, instead of focusing on the issues I normally focus on in this monthly column I write about Black economics, I decided to go another direction. And here's what I wrote. However, in this particular volume, I'm going in a different direction. Instead of focusing on our economic plight, I need to dispel the myth. Now, follow me on this. I need to dispel the myth that the 34 count adjudicated, 5 times indicted, 3 times KKK endorsed, 2 times impeached, and 1 time sexual assault / rape decreed Republican Party presidential candidate Donald Trump ever did anything to promote the interest of Black people. So I start off by saying that, telling you what he is, who he is, and explaining as a result, he's never done anything with Black people. And of all the terms I use, all the adjectives I use to describe him, once you heard that he was endorsed by the KKK, not just once, not just twice, but 3 times, why in the hell would any Black person ever vote for him? Think about that. The KKK, the leading terrorist organization in American history, want to this day, not only lynch Black people, but abolish the 13th Amendment and re-enslave Black people. That's what the KKK stands for. And you're telling me that there are some Black people who are voting for a guy who is endorsed by the KKK's former Grand Dragon, David Duke. That's basically the president of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. There's a guy named David Duke. And Duke in 2016, Duke in 2020, and now Duke in 2024 is endorsing Donald Trump, the former Grand Dragon of the KKK. Again, I asked the question, why in the hell would any Black person support somebody like Donald Trump? But let me go on. So here's what I write. At the outset, I must dispel the biggest myth being circulated by stupid Trump-supporting Black people. Yes, I said stupid. And I use that word because Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines it as, quote, slow of mind, unquote, and lacking in intelligence, unquote. So if you're slow of mind, if you're lacking in intelligence, then Webster's dictionary defines that as stupid. I then go on to say that accordingly, any Black person who supports Trump is stupid. And then I get into the whole thing about the Stimmy money, because it's just crazy. Here's what I write. The biggest myth is the one where stupid Black Trump supporters claim, quote, he gave us $1,200 Stimmy money during the COVID-19 epidemic, unquote. That's what they say. He gave us a $1,200 check. Well, no, he didn't. In fact, if it was up to him, we wouldn't have gotten anything. If you know anything about politics throughout the history of the United States of America, since the days of George Washington, no president has ever put his name on a check from the federal government going to the public. Let me repeat that. I got to say it slow. Matter of fact, I got to say it slow and clear. Let me take a sip of water here. throughout the history of the American government, throughout the history of the presidency in the United States, since the days of George Washington, who, by the way, resided here in Philadelphia in America's first White House back in 1790. And that's a whole other story. I'll get into that sometime in the future, in some future show. But since the days of George Washington and the first White House in 1790, no president in the history of the United States of America has ever had his name on a check issued from the federal government. Why? Because it comes from the Department of the Treasury. And the person assigned from the Department of Treasury signs that check. In fact, I want to be clear, although Trump's name, because of his arrogance, he forced his name onto the check. You know, when you write a check, and I'm sure young people have no idea what writing a check means because they really don't use checks, but let me go back to the history books because checks are still around. On the bottom left side of the check is what they call the memo line. So if you're writing a check to your landlord, you would write $1,000 for rent in the memo line. That way you know what that was for. And you usually print that, $1,000 rent, memo line. That's on the bottom left side of the check. On the bottom right side of the check is the payor line. That's where if I was writing this check, I would sign my name, Michael Cord, and it would be a signature. Well, Trump's name is not signed on the check. Trump's name is not on the right side of the check. Trump's name is not on the payer side of the check. He simply got his name printed on the left side of the check in the memo section. And dumbass people think that he pulled out his checkbook and wrote them a $1,200 check. No, he did not. That check actually came as a result of a Democrat, Nancy Pelosi. And I'm no real big fan of Democrats, and certainly not a real big fan of Nancy Pelosi because she's part of the system. You got to give credit where credit is due. And let me read this to you. Quote, "It is important for context that I point out that it was actually Democrat Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, who skillfully got the stimulus bill to the House floor, with her party, the Democratic Party, backing the bill by a 231-2 margin. And as a result of that, they got an essential congressional vote that passed before it went on to a veto-proof vote in the Senate." And I mentioned all that. It might sound convoluted, but what I want to tell you is that it wasn't Trump, it was the Democrats. It was the Democrats headed by Nancy Pelosi, and that was in the House. Then you go to the Senate. The Senate made sure that they had a veto-proof majority. Why? Because Trump was threatening to blow up the whole deal. He wasn't going to give anybody anything because he wanted to make sure that the finances stayed in the pockets of the wealthy, of his friends. So he was going to blow up the whole thing. But Nancy Pelosi, and I got to admit, she was a shrewd, whether you love her or hate her, a shrewd and skillful politician. She was able to get it through the Democrats in the House. That's why they supported 231-2. And then the Senate took over, made it veto-proof. They had to, because if they hadn't had enough in the Senate, as Trump said, he's going to blow up the whole deal because he didn't like it. So not only did Trump not give Black people or anybody $1,200, he wouldn't have given them anything if he could have gotten away with it. But the thing that I respect about Donald Trump, hold on to your seatbelts when I say this. When I say, are you going to say something good about Trump? Well, no, I'm not going to say anything good about him. I'm just going to be candid about how effective he was in one regard. Here's the thing. You got to give Trump credit because he knows how stupid the American public is. He knew that if he got his name printed on a check, not signed on the bottom right as payers do, but simply printed on the left side, then people would believe that he personally gave them a check. You might think, well, I'm exaggerating. Let me repeat to you what Donald Trump said, quote, "Here's what I write. By the way, I do have to give Donald Trump credit for one thing. He definitely knows how stupid many Americans are," which is exactly why, jot this down, which is exactly why on February 24, 2016, February 24, 2016, he said, quote, "I love the poorly educated," unquote. He said on February 24, 2016, quote, "I love the poorly educated," because he knew that they would go for anything. So if he got a check issued by the Department of Treasury through the IRS, and he knew he couldn't sign it because presidents can't sign it, he knew he couldn't be listed as the payor because he can't do that, he simply had it printed on the check. If you don't believe me, read my Tribune article. I have a photograph of the check, and you'll see there's a woman by the name of Vona Robinson. You might say, well, who's Vona Robinson? Vona Robinson is the dispersing agent, the person who gives out the check. And she's from the Bureau of Fiscal Service at the IRS. And the IRS is part of the Department of Treasury. So you had some clerk, dispersing clerk, whose signature is on it. That's the payor. And then your name is on it as the payee. Donald Trump didn't have anything to do with that. And again, would have blown up the whole deal to undermine the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi if he could have. That's important, folks. You need to realize that. But you got to get the article. I don't want to spend too much time going over this because I only have about maybe 26, 27 more minutes to deal with the other two issues. But please, and again, thanks to Riley, our producer, our engineer, just go to phillytrib.com, type in CORD, COARD, and type in stimulus, STIMULUS. The article will come up. Other thing I did in that very quickly before I get to my second topic is this. I exposed Trump for the racist he is. Remember I told you that the Grand Dragon, the former Grand Dragon of the KKK, David Duke, endorsed Donald Trump in 2016, in 2020, and in 2024. That's all you need to know. You also need to know that Donald Trump called the Nazis, he called them very fine people. You need to know that. He also talked about a complete immunity to cops for brutalizing people, especially Black people. So if a cop kills somebody like Derek Chauvin did with George Floyd and federal charges are filed, Donald Trump said he would immunize. What does immunize mean? Well, you see, Brother Malcolm on my right side telling me, Mike, explain immunize. Immunize simply means to make it legal. So normally, me pulling out a gun and shoot my neighbor in the head would be a crime. But if President Trump says, hey, I'm going to immunize Michael Cord, so he can go around shooting anybody in the head because he's not going to be prosecuted. Well, Donald Trump already said he would immunize cops for charges of brutality. Think about that. And who's brutalized by cops? You guessed it, Black people. So why would Black people want somebody who would give cops free rein to do that kind of thing? There's much more I have in the article. Take a look at it. But the main thing, understand this. Donald Trump did not give anybody any stimulus money. And if it had been up to him, he would have made sure that you didn't get that $1,200, that you didn't get anything. That's topic number one. Topic number two, I'm going to make it the Dr. Cornel West issue. And the reason why I'm making that number two is because I want to get that in quickly before I get to the bigger story. And I really feel, I gotta admit, uncomfortable saying anything negative about Dr. Cornel West because he's truly a scholar and a gentleman. You've heard that term, such and such is a scholar and a gentleman. Well, that's exactly what Cornel West is. Dr. Cornel West is. And as I said early on, he is the most progressive and most revolutionary candidate to run for president. That's the good news. Well, check out the bad news. The bad news is that he's the most progressive and revolutionary candidate to run for president. So the good news and the bad news are the very same thing. You're saying, Mike, how could that be? Well, here's how it could be. We're in America, folks. Black folks are approximately 12, 13% of the population. Progressives are probably about 10% of the population. So numerically, we can't win, at least not right now. We can win in local elections. That's why we got people like Larry Krasner as the DA. That was a progressive movement. And you've seen throughout the country, there have been some progressive DAs elected because that's local, many of them in California. There have been some mayors who've been able, progressive, to win. There have been some city council people throughout the country because that's local. But once you get statewide, once you get regional, once you get national, then you're getting mainstream. And once you get mainstream, those folks in the Midwest, they don't want to hear about revolutionary movement. As much as I talk about the great Malcolm X, if we were able to somehow dig him up from his grave and reanimate him and run for president, he'd lose. If we could somehow persuade the great revolutionary Angela Davis to run, she'd lose. If we can get Sister Sada Shakur from Cuba and have her to run, she'd lose. Why? Because people ain't there yet. I'm there. Many of my comrades are there, but it's not enough of us. So when I look at people like Dr. Cornel West, I'm like, I love you politically. I love you academically. I love you as a legitimate comrade. But not only can you not win, now is not the time to play with fire. If there was some other stereotypical or moderate Republican running for president, who I might not like, because I generally don't like what Republicans stand for, but if there was one who was more moderate, more mainstream, then I could see Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West running, because the stakes aren't that high. If Dr. Cornel West pulls votes away from a less reactionary politician, then it's no big deal. But if he pulls it away from somebody who could beat the fascists, that's a problem. Let me go through some history books right now and share this with you for the next 5-7 minutes. 24 years ago, back in the year 2000, there was an extremely tight race between the Republican presidential candidate, George W. Bush, and the Democratic presidential candidate, Al Gore. It was the tightest presidential race in American history. And we're talking about millions. I would estimate about 60 plus 60, approximately 120 to 150 million voters. Think about that. Approximately 120 million to 150 million voters, the tightest in American history. You know why? Because let's round it off and say it's 150 voters during that time, 150 million voters at the time. You know that the reactionary, racist candidate from the Republican Party, George W. Bush, won an important state, a pivotal state, a key state, the state of Florida, by a mere 537 votes. You probably thought I misspoke right there, so let me repeat myself. George W. Bush, the racist, Republican, reactionary, beat a more moderate and more sensible pro-environment Democratic candidate, Al Gore, in the key state of Florida, among, throughout the country, approximately 150 million voters, by a mere 537 votes. Think about that, 537 votes. And it was because Ralph Nader was taking away votes from Al Gore. As I said, Al Gore, I wouldn't call him a progressive. I wouldn't call him a revolutionary at all. But I will say he was much more enlightened, and his position on the environment was key. I mean, he's one of the greatest environmentalist candidates in American history. So he did have that going for him and some other stuff going for him. So you got revolutionaries, you got progressives, you got woke voters who are looking at Al Gore and saying, well, he kind of sort of was moving in our direction, but he's still an establishment Democrat, so we're not going to vote for him. He's not revolutionary enough. He's not progressive enough. He's not woke enough. So we're not going to vote for him. We're going to vote for one of the most pro-consumer candidates in the history of the United States of America, Ralph Nader. You talk about the whole notion of folks having to wear seat belts and major auto companies having to have more safe vehicles and more environmentally friendly vehicles. You're talking about Fortune 500 companies shaking in their boots every time people like Ralph Nader's name came up. So he was that dude. He was that guy. Ralph Nader was the man who would fight for the rights of consumers. Nobody did it better. So we all loved him. Revolutionaries loved him. Progressives loved him. Woke people loved him. But think of how it works with the math, damn it. So we love Ralph Nader. We kind of sort of like Al Gore, but we despise Republican candidate George Bush. So do the math, people. If there are, round it off, 1,000 voters, and those 1,000 voters are progressives, and those 1,000 voters are revolutionaries, those 1,000 voters are socialists, those 1,000 voters are left wing. They're looking against, to oppose. They despise George Bush, so we're never giving him our vote, the 1,000 of us, rounding it off. But some of us 1,000 might be willing to give our vote to Al Gore because of his position on the environment. But then we say, nah, we're not giving him that because Ralph Nader gets an A on every category. Al Gore might get an A in the environment, but he might get a C or a D or an F in the other stuff progressives like. But Ralph Nader gets an A across the board. So instead of us 1,000 giving our votes to Al Gore, because we know we got to beat George Bush, we split that vote, that 1,000. 500 of us like me say, I love you, Ralph Nader, but I hate George Bush even more. So 500 of us of that 1,000, we stay with Al Gore, not because we love him, it's because we're strategic. But the other 500 of us, we say, nah, we're not supporting that establishment Democrat. We're going to support our man, Ralph Nader. So 500 go there. And then what happens? George Bush wins the presidency of the United States of America based on one state only, Florida. And he wins Florida by 537 votes. If those 1,000 progressives had thought more with their head than their heart, if those 1,000 progressives had thought more strategically and less emotionally, Al Gore would have beaten George Bush. And American history would be completely changed for the better. That's what the great Ralph Nader did, the greatest consumer rights activist in American history. But he was, as I said at the beginning, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I'm sure Ralph Nader had good intentions about what he would do once he won, once he took office. But damn it, he couldn't win. He didn't get many votes, but he took a lot of votes away from Al Gore. That's 24 years ago. And Dr. Cornel West, one of the greatest scholars in American history today, you talk about the academy, meaning colleges and universities. Everybody respects Dr. Al Gore for his scholarship. I don't know if it's ego. I don't know if it's arrogance. I don't know what it is, because I know Dr. West has to see. He has to see that what he's doing is, first of all, he can't win. Everybody, even those who like him, knows he's not going to get more votes than Kamala Harris. He's not going to get more votes than Donald Trump, so he can't win. But what he can do is to take away votes from Kamala Harris. Nobody who's thinking about voting, and follow me on this, nobody who's thinking about voting for Kamala Harris would ever vote for Donald Trump. If you're thinking about voting for Kamala Harris, you would never vote for Donald Trump. But if you're one of those people thinking about voting for her and you say, nah, she's not progressive enough, she's not revolutionary enough, she's not socialist enough, she's not left-wing enough. So what you do is you take those 1,000, the hypothetical number I mentioned, those 1,000 say she's not enough. She's not enough like Malcolm X. She's not enough like Assata Shakur. She's not enough like Angela Davis. So we ain't voting for her. We're going to vote for Dr. Cornel West. That's what Trump wants. As a matter of fact, many of the lawyers who are following on this, many of the large law firms and big time lawyers who are fighting to keep Dr. Cornel West on the ballot in all the states, including the swing states. You know, those law firms and those lawyers are Republicans. That's just why would Republican law firms, why would Republican lawyers want Dr. Cornel West to remain on the ballot in every state? Because those law firms and lawyers know that would drain votes away from Kamala Harris. Not that those people, no Cornel West fan, no Cornel West supporter, no Cornel West voter would ever vote for Donald Trump. But they would vote under certain circumstances for Kamala Harris. So Trump, the maggots, the Republican law firms, Republican lawyers are fighting tooth and nail to keep Dr. Cornel West's name on every state ballot, especially the swing state ballots. That to me is enough. If Trump supporters want Cornel West's name to remain on the ballot, you got to ask yourself why. Because they know that would help Donald Trump win. So although it pains me, I'm looking at the numbers from year 2000, comparing them now today, 2024. George Bush won by getting 48.4% of the vote. 48.4% of the vote, compared to Al Gore's 47.9% of the vote. That's almost the same number. Gore gets 47.9. Round that off, that's 48. George Bush gets 48.4%. Round that off, that's 48. George Bush won across the country, based solely on Florida, 48% to 48% to 48.4%. Let me repeat that, because I'm rounding it off. The actual numbers for Al Gore, 47.9%, and for Bush, 48.4%. But rounding off that 47.9 to 48. Rounding off, or not so much rounding off, but just acknowledging that 48.4% as just that. So you got the guy who won, got 48.4% nationwide. The guy who lost got 48%. That's 0.4. And if you go back to Florida, George Bush won that by a mere 537 votes, compared to approximately 150 million in the entire country. 150 million in the entire country, and you win based on one state by 537 votes. That was Ralph Nader's fault. Ralph Nader got George W. Bush elected. And sadly, my homie, one of the greatest scholars in America today, the esteemed Dr. Cornel West, is about to do the same thing in 2024. So Dr. West, please, man, whatever it is, if it's arrogance, if it's naivete, whatever it is, man, you got to pull out. You got to pull out. Because one, you can't win. You know you're not going to win. But your presence would take votes away from Kamala Harris, and your presence will therefore help Donald Trump to win. And I know you, beloved brother, Dr. Cornel West, you despise Donald Trump, and you should. You despise everything he stands for, and you should. But you're about to help him to win. So please, folks, don't vote for Dr. Cornel West, at least not in this election. And those who are out there saying, oh, Mike Court's supposed to be a revolutionary. Mike Court's supposed to be a socialist. Mike Court's supposed to be left wing. Mike Court's supposed to be progressive. I'm all of that. But you know what I'm not? I'm not a damn fool. That's what I'm not. That's why I'm telling you, even though of maybe 100 political issues, or I should say 100 political positions that Vice President Kamala Harris stand for, I probably disagree with about half of them, especially her position with Joe Biden on the genocide of brown people in Palestine, clearly. But if you think what Biden and Vice President Harris are doing in regard to Palestine and Israel, can you imagine what Donald Trump would do? Correct, you don't have to imagine. He already did it. He already said it. He was the only president in American history that moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to antagonize the Palestinians, to kiss the ass of the Israelis. He already did it. No other president has done that. They condemned that. And on top of that, Trump said that what Biden is doing is not enough for Israel. So you don't have to love what Vice President Kamala Harris is doing regarding Palestine or any other issues. But you got to know this. Either Trump or Kamala is going to be president. Nobody else. One of them. You decide what you want to do. Do the right thing. Do the smart thing. Dr. Cornel West, you can do the right thing. You can do the smart thing by pulling out. And voters who can hear my voice, you can do the right thing by ignoring Dr. Cornel West and voting for the person who could beat the orange fascist. That's number two. We got approximately 12 minutes left. So let me give you my final 12 minutes by talking about Project 2025. And again, Brother Malcolm is always whispering to me about making it plain. So over my right shoulder is a great portrait, great picture of Malcolm X. And I always remember what he always said, quote, make it plain. So I'm going to make it plain. Project 2025 is a nearly 1,000 page document. It's actually 922 pages. And I got to tell you folks, I went through every single page. And I got to be honest that I meticulously read every single word on each of the 922 pages. No. But I went through every page and flipped through every single page one at a time just to get the gist of everything. And I got to tell you, that stuff is crazy, which is why I wrote the following in my Philadelphia Tribune article back in July. In fact, it was on July 12th. So go to phillytrib.com, type in Cord, and type in Project 2025. And I don't have enough time to tell you exactly what's in the article. So let me get the key points, which are critically important. Here's how I start the article. Project 2025 is a politically malicious 922-page plan by several of Trump's Republican MAGA poly advisors and former administration appointees who now work at the Heritage Foundation. That's important because Trump's trying to say he knows nothing about Project 2025, but he got to know because it's being put forward by the Heritage Foundation. Well, who's part of the Heritage Foundation? Some of the very same Trump supporters that were Trump policy advisors in his White House. The same MAGA people who were in his administration. So he can't say he doesn't know because this is people who put it together. You might say, okay, Mike, I got that part. Well, what's the ultimate goal of Project 2025? Well, thanks for asking. Here's the answer. The goal of Project 2025 is to transform America into a dictatorship. Now, follow me closely on this because this is key. Here's what I write. Although this nearly 1,000-page document is complicated and convoluted, let's put it into historical context so you understand what it means. I know often people talk about Hitler and compare certain politicians to Hitlers and Nazis, and that might be kind of extreme. By the way, let me just quickly say this. When we're talking about some of the worst human rights monstrous violators in American history, yeah, Hitler was one of them, but worse than Hitler was King Leopold of Belgium. King Leopold of Belgium killed anywhere between 12 to 15 million Black folks in Africa. Let me repeat that. King Leopold of Belgium killed approximately 12 to 15 million Black folks in Africa. Hitler was a monster, but he killed 6 million of our Jewish brothers and sisters. That's horrific, killing 6 million of our Jewish brothers and sisters. Well, if it's outrageous to murder and exterminate 6 million, what is it to murder and exterminate more than twice that, at 15 million. The reason why we always use Hitler as the example of one of the worst human beings in world history is because he killed white people. It don't count if you kill black people. So even though I talk about Trump being Hitler, I wanted to talk about Trump being like King Leopold of Belgium, but people wouldn't know what I meant by that because they don't know the history, because the white educational system doesn't tell you the monster that King Leopold of Belgium was to the black people in the Congo. But I digress. Let me get back to my point. So in the article, I write that just 93 years ago, on March 23, now follow me on this, I'm going to say it slowly. Just 91 years ago, on March 23, 1933, a law was passed in Germany, and that law was called the Enabling Act of 1933. So stay with me. Just 91 years ago, in Germany, a law called the Enabling Act of 1933 was passed. Without getting into the nitty-gritty, let me just tell you this. What this law did, it gave the chancellor was basically the real power broker, the man with the juice in Germany. So the Enabling Act of 1933 gave the chancellor the power to make and enforce all laws without the involvement of the other two branches. We know how it works. You got the legislative branch, they make the laws. You got the judicial branch, the judges, they interpret the laws. And then you got the executive branch, which acts out the laws. Well, what the Enabling Act of 1933 in Germany did, it said only the executive branch has the power. The executive branch, the chancellor, the president, can ignore the judicial branch, can ignore the legislative branch. All the power goes to him. Let me just continue reading this. It gave the chancellor the power to make and enforce laws without the involvement of the legislature or the judiciary. And this is key here, folks. It marked the formal transition of Germany from a democratic republic to a totalitarian dictatorship. And the next year, that would have been 1934, August 2nd of 1934 to be exact, Hitler became the absolute leader. The term they use in Germany is the Führer. And the rest, as they say, is history. Well, what Trump's trying to do with Project 25 is basically the same thing. Let me read this part. The pro-dictatorial underpinnings of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is its outrageous claim that the entire legislative branch of the federal government is under the direct, exclusive, and total control of the president. So Project 2025 says what the Enabling Act of 1933 in Germany said. The chancellor, the Führer, in this case, the president, has all the power. Think about that. And they try to use some convoluted constitutional argument to make their claim, but it doesn't fly. And you might say, well, Mike, I hear what you're saying, man, but you know, Trump is bad, but he ain't that bad. He ain't no dictator. Well, you don't have to believe me, believe him. On December 6th of last year, 2023, Trump actually said on the news that he will, quote, be a dictator on day one, unquote. He said that out of Trump's mouth. He said on December 6th, 2023, I'll be a dictator on day one. That should scare you. You want more? I got more. A year before that, on December 3rd, 2022, and it's always great, and I learned this in law school and learned this from being a lawyer, the best way you beat somebody in a debate is you use their words against them. Here's what Trump said. He actually called for, quote, the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Let me repeat that. On December 3, 2022, Donald Trump called for the, quote, the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution, unquote. So he said the Constitution doesn't apply to him. He can do what he wants. In 2017, August 15 of 2017, he called the Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia, you know, the one who killed the innocent white protester. Trump called those Nazis, quote, very fine people. And in 2016, he was endorsed by David Duke, who's a neo-Nazi and the former Grand Wizard of the KKK. I might have used the term Grand Dragon, but it's actually Grand Wizard. David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the KKK, endorsed Trump in 2016, endorsed Trump in 2020, and is now endorsing Trump in 2024. Why in the world any Black person would support him is beyond me. Now, in our final 2 minutes, let me tell you very quickly some of the worst parts of 2025, Project 2025, what it will do. And this is maybe 5 or 6 things I'll mention out of literally hundreds. One, summarily fire tens of thousands of career civil servants who are not pro-dictatorship MAGA supporters. So, you know, you have federal clerks and people doing their job day to day. Many of them have been working there for 10, 20, 30 years, just making the country move forward. Fire them if they're not MAGA supporters. Make America great again. By the way, America has never been great for Black people. That's a whole nother show. But if you're not part of that, he's going to fire you. You already said, summarily fire tens of thousands. And can you imagine many Donald Trumps in every federal office you go to? Frightening concept. He wants to weaponize the Justice Department. So if there's any political official, elected official he doesn't like, just have them arrested. For what? For opposing him. That's part of Project 2025. He wants to kill more Black people. He said, well, how is he going to kill more Black people? He wants to expand the death penalty. You know, there's only Black people and poor people on death row. He wants to expand, not reduce, but expand capital punishment. I got a minute or 2 left. He also wants to ban Black history. He wants to ban women's studies. He wants to ban any courses that promote the interests of the oppressed groups in every school throughout the country. He wants to end all DEI programs, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, no more of that across the board. He also wants to eliminate the Department of Education. He wants to stop free lunches. He wants to terminate loan forgiveness. That's all part of Project 2025. He also wants to construct concentration camps to imprison our brown brothers and sisters trying to come in from Mexico and other Spanish-speaking countries. He wants to criminalize pornography. And you talk about pornography and some of the weird stuff that goes on, many of them we find are Republicans. You know, it's like the people who are into stuff, weird stuff, they tend to project. So what they'll do is they'll accuse you of the very same thing they are. So you got these weirdo Republicans talking about criminalizing pornography. That says a lot. Why? I mean, it seems to me every consenting adult, male, female, otherwise, can do whatever they want with other consenting adults. Why would the federal government want to get in their business? There's something going on here. A psychologist could explain that better than I can. He also wants to increase taxes on people who make $47,000 or more. They would pay more taxes under Project 2025, but billionaires would pay less taxes. There's much more I want to share with you, but I run out of time. All you got to do, folks, is just go to phillytrib.com, type in CORD, C-O-A-R-D. Over the last 2 or 3 months, you'll see all this stuff. Also, follow me on my radio show, which is called the Radio Courtroom. This is the TV courtroom, but follow me on the Radio Courtroom every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Big shout out to the producer extraordinaire who's not here, my good friend Roland, and very big shout out to the gentleman who is sitting in for Roland, doing a great job. That's Riley. We appreciate him. I'm going to end this show like I end every show. It goes like this. Think Black. I'm out.